Hello, and welcome to another episode of More Studios Streams Design. Today we will be working on the UI again. In order to do that, we will be studying. Let me just get my Twitch chat pulled up on my phone, and we'll be off to the races. There we go. Cool. Thanks for being patient with me. Let's hop into the business. Okay. Technology, I remember this part. Well, this guy's predicted Google Glass pretty well. Ugh. Alright. Design requires cooperative efforts of multiple disciplines. The psychology of everyday actions. Furnished house orders. Walked over. can talk, but I'm going to be streaming.
Oh, okay. What are you streaming?
I'm studying the book, The Design of Everyday Things, and taking notes on uh, the questions inside of it, as well as the individual points of interest within each chapter, with the goal of having a comprehensive set of notes that explains design to anyone who would want to join the team, or um, any one of the viewers really who don't want to read through this 200 some page book.
Oh, so the book answers those questions. It just
It's just long.
have you read it?
Yeah, I read through it when I was watching Extra Credits. It was one of the books that they recommended, but I didn't
Oh,
take any notes the first time. So while I remember affordances and signifiers, conceptual model, like I couldn't give you an accurate definition before, whereas now I have my notes.
wait. So you're just like reviewing the notes, or
I'm creating the notes.
oh, so you're doing the let's read.
Yep, essentially. I don't know how interesting that is for people, but I think that the information is very valuable, and from what I remember about reading it, I think there were some insights into UI design that I want to revisit. I don't remember specifically where they were. So, since I'm working on UI design after finishing the Iceland, I'd like to get as much of the information in my head and working within my subconscious uh, as possible.
Oh, all right. Well, that's kind of good.
I think so. I hope so.
It's Scott's birthday today.
Yeah, yeah, I sent him a happy birthday earlier.
I'm gonna draw him a new profile pic.
Not Lafu Lafu.
No, it's gonna be of him.
Oh, okay. This is fair.
Oh, you know the people in Heroes of the Storm that ride around on those rainbow horses?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Um, they got those because they bought something during beta and alpha, and you get that if you do.
Gotcha.
And the people on the Direwolves have level 100 World of Warcraft characters.
Okay.
And I don't know how to unlock the Diablo running mount, you know, where he goes on all fours and runs like a wolf.
Yes.
I think that's unlocked through his kit. Well, not through his kit, but through his progression.
Okay. That's kind of cool.
Well, because I like see a lot of people with him, with that mount. It seems odd that there'd be such a grand scale of people buying that.
Yeah. I agree. If you're seeing it 60% of the time, even, it's unlikely that that many people are doing so.
Oh, it's the default mount for Diablo.
I see.
I guess I just have to change mine out.
There you go. Question answered.
It is a cool mount. Wow, that's cool that they decided to do that. Because I always thought, like, the way you play the character, you have to kind of mount up and then go in because that extra speed boost you get really helps you catch people. And it's just kind of silly that, you know, he hops on a horse, then goes in and fucking choke slams a guy off the horse, which is, you know, epic in itself, but I don't think it's something that Diablo would do.
Right. unless you're Diablo's some time traveling badass.
Horse rider.
Yeah.
Plus, he just looks bad on the mounts.
It's imbalanced because he's got such a large model. There's a passage here that I agree with from an information design standpoint. I've run into this a lot of times with things I've wanted to try and learn but haven't been able to access. He says, in the case of things they believe they should be capable of using, water faucets, refrigerator temperature controls, stovetops, users simply think I'm being stupid when they can't operate them. Alternatively, for complicated looking devices, sewing machines, washing machines, digital watches, or almost any digital controls, they simply give up, deciding that they are incapable of understanding them. Both explanations are wrong. These are the things of everyday household use. None of them has a complex underlying structure. The difficulties reside in their design, not in the people attempting to use them.
Wait, so it's pretty much saying that the user is never at fault?
Correct.
That's
The user is errorless, and you move forward with that assumption in order to create things that are well designed.
Oh, then I agree with that.
Generally, your job as the designer is to try and bridge the gap between, well, he says it right here, so I'll use his words.
Well, like, I guess if you expect your customers not to fuck up at all, then you're missing out on a lot of, I guess, empathetic design, where you're just like expecting people not to understand a thing, and so you make it easier. Or if you expect something to be too simple, you'd make it harder. Like, you can't just be like, oh, they'll get this.
I think specifically for the sort of design he's talking about, or any, I think in terms of the pursuit of design, for the way that this guy considers it, thinks about it, what what you're attempting to do is address how the user thinks the thing will operate and try and figure out where they're going to have issues between how you've designed the thing and how they think it operates. And the clearer that you can make how it is supposed to work, the things that you have afforded for within the design of the product, the clearer you make the signifiers of those affordances, the easier it is for the user to utilize whatever you've made. And the better a job you do of that, the less chance your product has of failing in whatever its purpose is. What he's trying to do is encourage you to design a failureless product.
Doesn't that mean that you're taking like a lot less risks? I think the risk of failure is really important for anything that's gonna be really important.
The risk of failure is fine on the design side. When you're designing something, you should be taking risks of failure, certainly. If you want to create a product that expands whatever uh, field of design you're working in. But when it comes to the user, you never want to create systems that would encourage or enable their failure. Because the purpose of your object is to be utilized in specific ways to be an efficient product. The purpose of your product is not to force the end user to interact with it in inefficient ways.
And that's from a UI perspective.
That's from like a strict design perspective.
Well,
Create
like
and
some games make things more difficult than they have to be on the player, even in UI design and enemy design, for a very specific effect. And I wouldn't consider that effect bad. I would consider it bad in a game that isn't self-aware enough to notice it happening. But I think if the, you know, design decision was intentional and the whole game was designed about it, I think it certainly could work.
Let's say that I think that's analogically like a separate categorization of design. I think more what this guy is trying to say is like um, let's say I have the A button, and the A button is my primary interface for interacting with the world,
Yep.
and my A button does a number of different things. It can open doors, it can close doors, it can talk to people, it can attack people. It's like a context sensitive button. But there's an interaction between the A button and the B button that makes the game a lot easier to go around with and do because it makes the A button's inputs more specific. And the player is never told about this interaction between the A button and the B button. The fact that the B button affords for more directed and efficient interactions with the world through the A button, and that's never revealed to the player in any way, um, means that the B button lacks a signifier. And of course this is an analogy, but because it lacks that signifier, the relationship that you've afforded for actually doesn't exist. Because the definition of an affordance is a relationship between the user of the um, system and the system itself. It's not that the system enables a given thing to be done. The system has to enable it, and the user has to be able to know that it works. Like, let's say, for example, that I bring in a player who has no knowledge of MOBAs whatsoever. And there's a system in my game where last hitting does a number of different things. If they don't have an outside knowledge of last hitting and you don't teach them anything about last hitting, then you haven't afforded for their capability to last hit because their relationship with the information you're giving them doesn't exist. Whereas a more experienced player has been afforded the capability of interacting with that system.
Yeah. And I think that is a really good example because most MOBAs ask you as soon as you boot up for the first time, um, like how familiar are you with these games? And they're not gonna bother wasting your time telling you about last hitting when you already know what that is.
Yes.
Would you consider something like a tutorial or even just organically teaching the players controls? Would you consider that an element of UI design?
Yes, because you're giving the player. Okay, let me go grab the definition for signifiers so that we're on the exact same page. But you're giving the player a signifier. You're enabling them to be afforded for. You're creating affordances by establishing the relationship for how your systems are to be used. Um, so a tutorial is the introduction of your signifiers. It's like if the player comes into your building and there are a whole bunch of doors in front of them, but the doors have like ambiguous pull push handles at first, and your player's just walking through that building and getting frustrated because they can't ever open a door when they come to it. The tutorial is the thing that puts push and pull signs on the doors, and those are your signifiers. Uh,
Whereas, well, I guess this is the same sort of thing as just putting something on a door, but if you see like an NPC in that situation pull on a door up ahead of you, like let's say you're chasing a guy through a building
mhm.
and the main mechanic is opening the doors, so you catch a glimpse of um, this NPC you're chasing opening a door, and you'll know based on that which way the door goes because you've observed briefly someone doing that.
That's also a signifier.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a more intuitive signifier than putting like a push or a pull sign, because really, if you design the door correctly, you shouldn't need that signifier. The signifier should be intuitive, like an outward facing hinge and a pull only interface for the hand suggests to the user before they even get to the door that you're going to be pulling it open. Um, So actually, I think this will be very interesting to you. I'm gonna give you the whole of the notes that I've got so far, and you can read through them whenever you get a chance. But really, the important sections are affordances and signifiers. Hey, Noman or Naman, Namin, welcome. Send file. UI stop text. Open. There you go.
File received.
The 7 stages. 7 stages of second pronunciation. Nomin or Nomin. I hope that was the one.
I get people whose names I can't pronounce on stream all the time, and I feel really bad.
Yeah, I don't want to like
And then they
butcher.
laugh at me, and then I feel worse.
I don't want to like butcher your names. I've got one that gets butchered all the time, or my handle Amadeus gets butchered all the time. Um, Also, everyone's seen a substitute teacher just completely cannibalize someone's name. They're just not in on the in joke. I watched it happen to a friend of mine all throughout middle school because her name was difficult to pronounce. Substitutes would just hit it like a freaking, uh, those obstacle courses in army training. They would have gone through all the barbed wire and like all the other fun stuff, and then there was like a 100-foot wall with a rope, and you just watch them sweat. And they try and climb it the first time, and they fuck up, and then the second time and the third time, they just keep screwing up, and everyone's laughing at them. Eventually, they get it right, and their reputation never recovers afterward. They can never regain control of the class.
That's so sad.
It is. They didn't know that that was the situation they were walking into. See, if I were a substitute, I would call someone from the class outside of the room and then go through with them. How do I pronounce each of these people's names? Executing action. That way I never get caught. Okay. There are 2 parts to an action: execution of the action, evaluation of results. Hello, Leonardo. Just got done my remix. Perfect. Good for you. Congratulations on that remix. Suppose I am sitting in my armchair reading a book. Dusk and always starting to fail. I would recommend reading through this if you get the chance, if only because this guy, whenever he comes to a problem, he discusses it analogically. So if you are having difficulty understanding the concept, there's a perfect analogy for whatever it is you're ever having difficulty understanding. And I think my notes tend to gloss over some of the analogies. Current activities. How did I do that? If anyone has any questions about what we're doing, why we're reading what we're reading, please feel free to ask. Skill training test seems possible. Goal plan specified. Whoops. It's the wrong notepad. Goal. Plan. Specify. Perform. Okay. Well, this is an interesting separation he's created. He's looking at the psychology of user actions, and he's split them into 7 stages. And I think when you're developing UI, you should always be thinking about what the player's objectives will be at any time, and where your UI is failing in terms of any of these individual objectives. Does my UI afford